Mythologies from around the world are full of some pretty messed up stories. These are some of the darkest. Number 1. Procne and Philomela. When you think of dark myths, ancient Greece and Rome probably spring to mind, and that is true, famously featuring child-devouring titans and the slaying of petrifying gorgons. But one of the lesser-known Greco-Roman tales, centering around two sisters, is particularly horrifying. The legendary Athenian king Pandion had two beautiful daughters, Procne and her younger sister, Philomela. He was at war with the city-state of Thebes over a boundary dispute and was sorely losing, so he sought an alliance with the powerful but bloodthirsty king, Tereus of Thrace. Together they won the war, and as a reward for Tereus's help, Pandion gave his oldest daughter Procne in marriage. The two had a son together, Itis, but not all was well in the marriage. The cruel Tereus started to lust after Procne's younger sister, Philomela. One day he visited Philomela when she was by herself and overpowered her, taking her by force. To ensure she wouldn't tell anyone of his crime, he took hold of her tongue and cut it out. He then trapped her in a tower, unable to talk or escape, often visiting her. Philomela was clever, though. On one of Tereus's visitations, she embroidered the story of what happened into one of his robes. When Procne eventually found this embroidery, she was horrified and furious. She freed Philomela from her tower, and the two vowed to wreak revenge upon Tereus. In a shocking twist to punish Tereus for what she saw as his philandering and what he did to her sister, Procne killed her own infant son, Itis, and served him up as a meal to an unknowing Tereus. When she revealed to Tereus what he had just eaten, he was filled with shock and horror, giving them enough time to attack him, in some versions flinging the innocent son's head at Tereus. Chapter 2. The Torture of Loki. In Norse mythology, the trickster god Loki is a complicated character. He does commit terrible deeds, though at times his escapades end up with a positive outcome. In one myth, it is down to Loki's quick thinking that a builder builds a huge wall around Asgard. And in another, Thor ends up with his famous hammer because of one of Loki's pranks, but his pride leads to his downfall and eventual torture. Prior to this, Loki had several children, including a huge wolf named Fenrir, a giant serpent called Jormungandr, and a daughter who was half skin-toned and half blue-black, representing a corpse. When they were still young, the chief of the Norse gods, Odin, prophesied that they would bring doom. So he and the other gods kidnapped the children. They tricked the wolf Fenrir into being chained up, while the god Tyr had his hand in Fenrir's mouth. When Fenrir realized the trick, he ripped Tyr's hand clean off. Odin then threw the serpent Jormungandr into the world sea. Lastly, he cast the daughter Hel into Niflheim, the realm of darkness, letting her rule over this domain. But the imprisonment of his children is far from the worst thing to happen to Loki. Later, the prideful trickster god hears that the god Balder is immortal and is riddled with jealousy. He eventually finds out that Balder does have a single weakness, mistletoe. So he makes an arrow from mistletoe and tricks a blind god, Hoder, into shooting and killing Balder with it. Odin is furious and has Hoder killed. Ultimately, the gods realize Loki is to blame for Balder's death, so they angrily search for him. When they find him, they capture Loki and his two other children and take them to a cave. The Norse gods permanently turn one of the sons into a hungry wolf, who immediately kills and tears his brother apart. If the death of one of his children in front of him and the transformation of the other into a wild beast wasn't dark enough, Loki's story gets worse. Loki is tied to the cave, using his son's entrails as chains. Then a venomous snake is tied above his head, with venom slowly dripping from its fangs, painfully burning Loki's forehead. When the gods leave, Loki's wife takes a bowl and fills it with the venom to stop her husband's suffering, but the bowl fills to the top and has to be emptied by his wife. Every time this happens, Loki writhes in pain. Somehow the myth gets even darker. The Norse believed that the end of the world is destined to happen and that this will be called Ragnarok. At that time, Loki will break free of his child's entrails and gather his other imprisoned children and fight alongside the Norse gods' enemies, bringing about the destruction of both forces and the end of the world as we know it. Fenrir, the huge wolf, will devour the sun and swallow Odin whole. Odin's son will then avenge his father and kill Fenrir. Loki's daughter Hel will send her army of the dead to help her father, and the world serpent Jormungandr will grow so huge he will battle the strongest Norse god, Thor. Thor will eventually kill Jormungandr, but 9 steps later, succumb to the serpent's poison and die himself too. Number 3. The Inuit Sea Goddess. The goddess of the sea in Inuit mythology is a powerful maternal figure associated with both marine animals and Adlavan, the Inuit underworld. There are several versions of how she became a deity, but the most popular is both tragic and harrowing. The myth of the sea goddess starts with a girl from Baffin Island called Sedna. She was beautiful but independent and had many suitors. She rejected every one of them, and this angered her father, who wanted his daughter married. One day, though, a mysterious and handsome man appeared in the distance of the island. Sedna heard him calling her, beckoning her to come with him to his island, promising it was filled with riches and luxury. Intrigued by his good looks and promises, Sedna climbed into his boat with him. When the two got far enough for Sedna's homeland to disappear in the distance, she noticed his appearance had changed. His hands had turned into wings, and he was revealed as a loon bird spirit. She was terrified but had nowhere to go. They finally reached the loon bird man's home, and Sedna realized she was now a prisoner on this cold and desolate island. After a few days passed, the loon bird left Sedna alone so he could go and hunt. She saw a boat across the horizon. On it was her father. She was overjoyed and rushed to get on his kayak. Her father paddled the two of them far away from the island, but they saw a storm coming and heard the cry of a bird. When they looked back, they saw the loon bird man in chase. Sedna's father was terrified of being drowned by the horrendous creature, so he grabbed Sedna and threw his daughter off the boat, hoping this would satisfy the loon bird. As Sedna struggled to keep her head above the waves, she managed to grab onto the boat, but her father, thinking only of his own safety, grabbed her hand and instead of pulling her up, used his knife to slice her fingers off. As she drowned, her body sank deeper into the ocean, and her severed fingers came with her. Suddenly, the lower half of her body transformed, and she grew a fishtail. Her hair grew long, and her fingers turned into seals and walruses. This became the origin of marine animals, and Sedna from then on became the goddess of the underworld and creatures at the bottom of the ocean. Chapter 4. The Buddhist Hell. In Christianity, hell is described as a terrifying place, a furnace of fire with residents tormented with fire and brimstone. But the Buddhist Naraka is a far more complex, multi-layered place. The hell realm known as Naraka is one of the 6 paths of Buddhism, 6 destinations where you can be reborn, depending on your karma. Other possible rebirths in the 6 paths include the world of gods, the world of animals, and the world of hungry ghosts. But Naraka isn't a single place. The hell realm is made of many hells, or Narakas. It is unclear how many Narakas there are, as the number differs between sources, but the most prevalent idea is that there are 8 hot hells and 8 cold hells, with a number of neighboring or boundary hells. Information on the cold hells is much sparser, but the punishments center around severe cold as torment. For example, the hell of Padma is so cold that it blisters the skin and tears open, resembling the shape of a red lotus flower called a Padma. The terror of the 8 hot hells is far more documented in Buddhist scriptures. The first hell, the hell of reviving, is for people who kill or commit violence. In a battle royale-like scenario, the sinners are armed with iron claws, knives, and hatchets, and mince each other to death. Then a cold wind blows through, reviving the fallen, and it happens over and over again. In the 6th Naraka, known as the Hell of Heat, animal killers and drunkards are punished by being impaled by glowing rods and roasted over a fire. In the 7th Naraka, the Hell of Great Heat, apostates are herded onto a mountain and blown off into a valley of burning iron spikes. The last layer of the 8 hot hells of Naraka is the worst, known as Avicii, which roughly translates to the hell of unrelenting pain. This is because the entire hell is engulfed in raging flames, meaning that there is not even a brief escape from the torment. Only the worst of the worst go here. The residents here have committed one of the 5 most serious offenses in Buddhism, which include killing a father or mother or injuring a Buddha. The good news, unlike Christian and many other hells, even the worst Naraka is temporary. Even a person who has committed patricide will only be here until their bad karma is worked off. The bad news, if you did end up in the lowest hell, Avachi, some sources claim you would be there for about 3.4 quintillion years. Thanks for watching. I'll probably do more of these if this does well, so let me know of any dark myths I've not covered yet. Don't forget to like and subscribe.